Okay, thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. I'm very happy to get this opportunity to explain in more details the press release we published Friday, and also perhaps give more explanation to the status of the first cohort of SCO-101 plus chemotherapy treated patients. And I'm actually sorry a little bit that we were not clear enough. There's been a lot of questions about different subjects in the press release, but I'll do my best now to explain everything. And I've decided actually to go through the press release line by line and then explain what it means if that is needed. And then at the same time, I will encourage all of you to use the chat function if you have additional questions, and I can see your questions here, so I will either pick them up while I'm going through the press release or will take them afterwards. Okay, so let's look at the press release from Friday. And what it says, and I read it actually here, Scandion Oncology reports on data from the first cohort of chemotherapy-resistant colorectal cancer patients treated with SCO-101 and chemotherapy FOLFIRI. And what it says here, it's actually the first time ever in history that SCO-101 is combined with chemotherapy. So this first part is a dose-finding part. So we started with 150 milligrams of SCO-101 and standard dose of chemotherapy. And there were 3 patients there are 3 patients in each cohort, and the next cohort that would follow would naturally be a higher dose of SCO-101. But you'll find out that we decided a little bit differently. FOLFIRI is the combination of chemotherapy that is given as standard treatment to patients with metastatic colorectal cancer. Next line, all patients in the first cohort have now completed at least 1 treatment cycle, 14 days. So we waited to release this press release until we had the first 3 patients having received SCO-101 plus chemotherapy for 1 cycle. The main result is that 150 milligram daily oral SCO-101 potentiates the effects of chemotherapy. What does that mean? That means that we can see on specific targets for chemotherapy that the effect is enhanced compared to what could be seen when the patient received only chemotherapy before they got into the study. And then based on the safety data from this first cohort of patients, the Data Safety Monitoring Board has recommended to include 3 additional patients at 150 milligram SCO-101 in order to get more details on the interactions between SCO-101 and FOLFIRI. And this is actually what I will focus on. Why did they decide this? And this was actually a suggestion, and we had a discussion, and Scandion Oncology totally agrees. I'll get back to this because this is actually what the rest is about. So the patients included are patients with late-stage metastatic colorectal cancer. What does that mean? That means that they have spread of their cancer, and all of them to the liver. This is where most colorectal cancer do spread to the liver, and for whom no additional treatments is available. And that means that they have undergone the 2 standard treatments. One is FOLFIRI and the other one is called FOLFOX. So all the patients here have received both treatments, and we had a little extra selection criteria that the patients should have had a prior response to FOLFIRI. That means when they got FOLFIRI first time before they entered our study, there was a benefit. Either the tumor was shrinking or they had stable disease. But what happened for these patients was that the tumor suddenly started growing again as determined by CT scanning. And then normally you would stop treatment, and since they have received both the standard types of standard treatment, they are normally sent home with no further treatment and to die, actually. But now they are offered to enter the Scandion Oncology phase 2 study. So why did we select especially these patients who had a prior response? Because I wanted patients who had shown that they had the mechanism in their cancer cells to respond to FOLFIRI, but something happened during the response and the tumor started growing again. They became resistant. So the hypothesis has been that if we could block the resistance mechanisms, then the FOLFIRI treatment could come back and work again. So we knew that they were not totally resistant to anything and so on. They had proven themselves that they had a tumor that could respond to FOLFIRI, and that's why we were very selective with these patients. I continue my treatment. The cancer continued to grow, or the patients showed new metastatic lesions, and they were offered enrollment in the Scandion Oncology clinical phase 2 study. And this is what I just told you. We did select these patients. The primary objective of the trial is to establish the safety, tolerability, and maximum tolerated dose of SCO-101 in combination. And then it disappears from my little print out here, but we also wanted to see if we could already here determine a tumor effect. Okay, data from the first patients treated in cohort 1 showed, and then we take this very slowly, and I take each of these points. SCO-101 at a daily oral dose at 150 milligrams for 6 days, and together with chemotherapy, results in the expected transient increase in the exposure biomarker bilirubin. What does this mean? It means that from the phase 1 studies, and there were 4 phase 1 studies, and we just had a publication coming out describing the results of these 4 phase 1 studies. In these studies, SCO-101 was given alone, not together with any other drug, especially not together with chemotherapy. It was given alone. And in these 4 studies, it was shown that SCO-101 inhibits a specific liver enzyme that makes sure that bilirubin, which is a product from hemoglobin, this is the protein that is binding oxygen in red blood cells. But when red blood cells die, this hemoglobin is released, and in the liver, it's changed to unconjugated bilirubin, and then it's changed to conjugated bilirubin and excreted. But since SCO-101 is inhibiting the conjugation, in the patients in the phase 1, we could see an increase in unconjugated bilirubin because it could not be converted to bilirubin and being excreted. But this was a short-term increase, and as soon as the treatment stopped, it did fall down to normal levels. And we saw exactly the same in these 3 patients. So when we gave SCO-101, we saw an increase in unconjugated bilirubin. As soon as we stopped, it took 3 days, they were back to normal levels. And it's not toxic. It's not dangerous to have this short-term increase. This is what we call an exposure biomarker. Now we know that the drug that we produced up in Karlskoga, at Cambrex in Karlskoga, is exactly the same as was used for the phase 1 study. We have done a lot of studies making sure that this was the case. We could see that the patients had taken the drug. We could see that it had its biological function by increasing unconjugated bilirubin. So far, so good. So now we have a proof that it gets in and it's doing what it's expected to do regarding bilirubin. Then we go to point 2. SCO-101 potentiates the effects on FOLFIRI on white blood cells. And this was very important and very encouraging, I must say, because FOLFIRI, one of its toxic effects is that it inhibits the production of white blood cells. Shortly, but it does, and it takes about 8 to 9 days after chemotherapy. If you measure in the blood, you can see white blood cells going down, and then a few days later, it gets up to normal levels, and then you can repeat your chemotherapy. And that's actually how the scheduling of chemotherapy is decided, that you need to have recovery of the white blood cells before you give the new treatment. And what are white blood cells? In this case, it's the cells that are important if you get infections. They are named neutrophil granulocytes, and they are there to combat infections. So we are very careful when we give chemotherapy that we get this recovery. And secondly, many types of chemotherapy, the doses that we give is actually established based on the effect of white blood cells. Okay, what did we see? We saw one thing more. All these patients had FOLFIRI before they entered our study, but they became resistant. So we know how they reacted on FOLFIRI before we saw them. What we did see here was that between day 7 and 9, where you have the maximum effect was larger than had ever been seen before on these patients. But they recovered at the same time as they did before. So they had a very steep curve down, the potentiation and went down, but they came up as fast as they would have done without SCO-101. But this is very important to us because this is perhaps the best window for effect of chemotherapy on normal cells. That is to follow the white blood cells. On the other hand, one should be cautious because we could not accept that they did, for example, not recover, because then we would have a toxic effect and we would have to lower the dose further. But we didn't see that. We saw the potentiation, but we also saw a normal recovery. Then we go to number 3, SCO-101 dosed in combination with FOLFIRI decreases blood concentrations of the liver enzymes ASAT and ALAT. What does that mean? So when a patient gets cancer in the liver, here it comes from originally from the colorectal cancer, it spreads to the liver, then the cancer cells are destroying the liver cells in order to get space to grow. And this is an extremely standard thing that patients with liver metastases, when they reach a certain size, these two enzymes starts increasing. So this is the measurement for liver damage when you have liver metastases. And often we identify that the patient must have spread of the cancer because now these enzymes are going up. So what we have seen in the patients is that when we give the combination of SCO-101 and chemotherapy, these enzymes goes down. They decrease in concentrations. And this is, for me, I mean, we still need to learn more about it. That's why we're including more patients. But for me, this could be an extremely important sign of anti-cancer effects. We need to confirm this is the case, and that's why we take in more patients. We have hired a consultant, the top specialist in Denmark in liver diseases, and he's been through all the data, and he agrees with me that this could certainly be a sign of anti-cancer effects, but he has helped us design some more studies on the next 3 patients so we can get a better insight into exactly what's happening. But this is, to me, very, very important. Number 4, all patients are assessed at 8 weeks interval by a CT scan for status of their disease. Due to the early stage of the trial, only 1 patient has currently completed 8 weeks of treatment. So before they enter the study, we do a CT scan, or they come with the CT scan showing progression. And then according to the protocol, they have a CT scan done every 8 weeks. And we have the first readout here. In order to have what is called confirmed response, you need to see the same after 16 weeks. I also wrote in the Q&A today that we don't have a control group in this first part of the study. That's not possible. We could not give irinotecan and 5-fluorouracil, the FOLFIRI regime, to these patients. That would be unethical because they would only get the side effects and no effect because they have proven resistant. But we cannot exclude that this is the natural history of this cancer, that it just enters into a stable phase and then later on it will continue to grow. And that's why we want to see it in all of the patients. What does it mean, stable disease here? And it means that there's no significant increase or decrease in the size of the tumor. If it had been a significant decrease, we would have called it partial or complete response. If it had grown significantly, we would call it progression. But I also included in the Q&A that we have a 3% change in tumor size after 8 weeks, which is, I guess, just expected variations in the measurements of the CT scan picture. So we have a stable disease here. Very important. And I'm really looking forward to report on the 2 next patients as soon as we have these data, and we'll have them soon. So when the physicians, the oncologists, saw the data, they decided that the patient should continue. If it had been progression, they had decided to stop the treatment of the patient. But they decided that the patient could continue an additional 8 weeks until the next CT scan. I think that's a very, very good sign. Yeah, and as I said, we will send out additional PRs. I just got a message here, see what I got here. Yeah, so to make it very clear, we have not observed any dose-limiting toxicity. We have seen a potentiation of the effect on the white blood cells of irinotecan, and this is very important what I'm saying now. In the phase 1 studies where SCO-101 was given alone, there was no whatsoever effect on white blood cell counts. So it is a combination, and I believe it's a potentiation. So having 3 additional patients included now has actually nothing to do with any toxicity, but it is to learn more about the interactions before we go to 200 milligrams. So we can design the 200 milligram study in the right way. It could be, as we have done here, but it could also be changed a little bit, and we are allowed to do that. But it is just a precaution. It's the first time ever in history that SCO-101 is combined with chemotherapy. We have to be careful and also clever at the same time. So this was more or less what was in the press release. I have my comments also, and I think I'm just more or less repeating what I said, but I can repeat once again that we do see this increase in unconjugated bilirubin. It has no clinical significance, but it's very, very important to us because it shows that SCO-101 is in the body and it's doing what it is expected to do based on information from the phase 1 studies. So this was our exposure biomarker. Yes, it's in there, and it's biological active being in there. The next one was the white blood cells. Very important. The best window I think we have for chemotherapy effects, and especially FOLFIRI here, that we can see FOLFIRI by itself has an effect on white blood cells. We know that, but here we see a potentiation that could be interpreted, but we have to be careful, could be interpreted that we have an increased cytotoxic effect of FOLFIRI now, and that hopefully will be reflected in the tumor cells as well. Thirdly, we see this decrease in these liver enzymes, and these liver enzymes increases in patients with liver metastases because the cancer cells that harbor now the liver, they destruct the liver cells, and thereby these enzymes are released. What did we see? we saw a decrease. Could be a sign of anti-cancer effect, but now we are adding more patients in order to study this further, so we hopefully can come up with some good explanations and conclusions. So at the end here, I'll say, what do I expect here? It's hard to predict. It's hard to say exactly what's happening, but I would not be surprised if we can prove that we have already, with 150 milligram, reached a biological active dose regarding drug resistance in cancer. This is what could easily be the case here. We have to be cautious and we have to do more experiments, and this is the main reason why we include 3 additional patients before we go to 200 milligrams. We need to understand and learn more about this interaction. I've had quite a few questions about, so what? Will you then go to the next part of this study where we treat 25 patients? Yes, then we will add more patients to either this dose or to 200 or 250 milligrams. We might go further up, but I do not expect that we need to go further up. And somebody would say, but the more the better. This is not the case with a drug like SCO-101, a non-toxic drug when it's given alone. This is not a matter of higher levels. It's a matter of giving enough to block the resistance. And we might know a little bit more very soon about this. So then you go to the next part of the study, and I have claimed and stated that we need 2 patients with a response in order to have proof of concept. And this is not something I invented. This is based on an international guidelines named Simon's 2-stage design, where if we, in this case, see 2 responders, and responders are complete responders, partial responders, or stable disease over 16 weeks, we have proof of concept. And when we have that, we have 2 options. We can continue with the 25 patients and see how many we get, or we can decide now we change the design into a randomized study. And this was actually what was suggested by the Danish Medicine Agency, the Danish Lægemiddelverket, that as soon as we could, we should change to a randomized study. So we had a control group, so we could really look for what is called time-dependent endpoints. That means, do they live longer? Is that important? Yes, because the European Lægemiddelverket, EMA, and the US Lægemiddelverket, FDA, they are not really interested in drugs that creates responders that shrink the tumor. What they really want to see are drugs that prolong survival, either progression-free survival or overall survival. And that's why we are very eager to get to a point where we can start looking more carefully into these 2 endpoints. Do they live longer? And that is what we all, of course, would like to see. We have examples with drugs that creates responders, the tumor shrinks, but it has no effect on survival or progression-free survival. And this is why these 2, EMA and FDA, they require actually that you can prove that it affects survival. So I don't know exactly, we will learn as we go along, because it's the first time ever that such a drug has been used in such a setting, and whether we will have to run all 25 patients or whether we can stop when we have proof of concept and then change it to a randomized study, we'll see in the future. So I'm very encouraged by this. Of course, we all are at Scandion Oncology because we have seen a potential effect. And I underline potential. We need to learn more. We're including 3 more patients at this stage. And then we'll go up to the next dose level. So I think we are at the most exciting stage at the development just now, and future will see where we go from here. But I believe we're on the right track. I have a little other questions here. Let's see what I have here. I just check it here. Yeah, so I should say a little bit more about this bilirubin. I'm asked to do that. So again, bilirubin is a degradation product from hemoglobin, so it just needs to get excreted and disappear. When we give SCO-101, and we knew this already from the phase 1 study, that we block the enzyme that helps excreting bilirubin. So we block it for a very short time period, so it increases in the blood because it cannot be excreted. But it goes down to normal levels about 3 days after we stop SCO-101 treatment. It's non-toxic. I repeat, it's non-toxic. It's of no clinical significance, but it's important to us because suddenly we have something we can measure and see that the drug is in there. The patient remember to take his or her tablets, and it is biologically active. This is what bilirubin is about. It's a non-toxic measure, and it's short-term, and it reverts to normal levels as soon as we are done with the 6 days SCO treatment, and they go into this drug holiday or 7 days without any treatment before they go to the next. So it's really a good measurement to us, a good picture of that the drug is in there and it's doing what it's supposed to do. Otherwise, I think we got around most of it. So please, if you have any questions, use the chat function or send an email or whatever you would like to do, and I will try to do my best to answer it right now. Okay? Oh, sorry, fortunately, I have a couple of very nice Swedish friends here who helps me a little bit remembering what I should answer. So here is some questions that we received prior also. I'm just reading here. Are they all considered to be stage 4 disease, these patients that you recruited into the study? Yes, they have metastatic disease, and that is a definition of stage 4. Then I'm asked, do you consider it enough to halt the tumor growth in order to prolong the patient's life? Or are we also hoping for tumor size reduction, the extended treatment, to hopefully get the patient into remission? Yeah, I mean, I would love to see that I could cure some of these patients, because this is the final goal of what we're doing here. Unfortunately, these are sick patients. They have a lot of cancer disease. They have had it for a while. So I'm not sure we will be able to cure any of these patients, but hopefully we'll prolong the life of the patients. What we have also announced is that we are starting here in the fall a pancreatic cancer study. And here we are allowed to start SCO treatment together with chemotherapy already at the first time they receive therapy. So we have patients who have not undergone several types of treatment, but we get them already from the first time they receive treatment. These are also metastatic patients. And here there are kind of two goals. One is, of course, to get more patients to respond. It's about 25% of the patients that are expected to respond to the standard chemotherapy. We hope that by adding SCO-101 to half of the patients, we'll get more responders. But as important, we hope that the responses will be prolonged. So we are trying to prevent the development of resistance by killing off resistant cells as soon as they appear, but we're also trying to get more responders in this study. Okay, so we go to the next question. We know that. Yeah. You mentioned to Midwatch that the results are really, really good and that we might be where we need to be. Does this mean that SCO-101 may have proved potent enough already at 150 milligram? Here we have to be cautious. I think we have some interesting indications that it is active in the first patient here, and we'll see as soon as we have the CT scan on the second patient, which will be very soon, whether we get the same. But we need these additional 3 patients to get more information and insight into what we have actually observed here. But I would say, yes, this is a possibility that already at 150 milligrams, we have the potency that we are going for. We'll find out. What happens when the additional 150 milligram cohort is completed? That means the next 3 patients. Will you continue with 150 milligram if we have responders? Does that mean proof of concept? Is a higher dose even needed? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it's needed to go up to 200 milligram. But on the other hand, for the sake of interest for the patients and for SCO-101, I think we need at least to go up 1 dose interval up to 200 milligrams to make sure that we are not overlooking something by giving a lower dose. But I would not be surprised from what I've seen already that 150 milligrams would be a possibility. I think there's another thing that I should add here, because we have a lot of discussions in the company. How do you use SCO-101 the best way? And we have this study ongoing and so on, but there's another possibility that we need to look at later on. For elderly patients, standard chemotherapy can be very toxic. It looks like here with 150 milligrams that we will be able to give lower doses of chemotherapy. That means less side effects, but keep the effect of the chemotherapy on the cancer. This is something I really would like to see, because there are more and more elderly people in the population. More and more of these gets cancer because cancer is related to older age, and they have problems by tolerating toxic chemotherapy. And here we might have a possibility to help here also. Next question. The first patient already showed stable disease at 8 weeks. Can we expect to get a PM with the 16 weeks results on patient 1 and patient 2 and 3? Yes, for sure. I can say as soon as we have the data, there'll be a press release. Do you believe they may also achieve stable disease? I can say I hope, but I need to see the data first. We go to the next question. There have been discussions of a move from the Spotlight stock market exchange to another stock market, First North or further up. Can you share anything with this? I can say, of course, this is a consideration. Should you stay at Spotlight, or do you at some point need to move further up? And there are many good reasons for staying, because Spotlight has proven to us to be an excellent market, high selling and buying of stocks every day, and shareholders who are willing to take the risk and have invested in Scandion Oncology. On the other hand, if you go further up, you have the possibility to attract institutional investors, pension funds, banks, and so on. So this is a discussion that is ongoing, but I cannot say very much more about that. Next question. In the event of a big pharma buyout, what are your thoughts on SOM001? This is the drug that works in antibiotic resistance. Would you make a spin-out company before the buyout? And would you consider a locked IPO for Scandion Oncology shareholders? First of all, yes, I think I would consider very strongly a spin-out before the buyout, because you don't want to have this as an appendix on it. What for SCO-101, the important thing here is the anti-cancer effect. For SOM001, I want, as soon as we have the last animal data, to spin it out. And yes, I mean, I would love to see Scandion Oncology shareholders also to take part of this. Number 10, are you working on a professional analysis that will help investors evaluate Scandion? The answer is yes. In the press release, you mentioned that detailed results are sent to your partners. Can you confirm that you have NDA with Big Pharma and they are reviewing the data as part of your discussions? I cannot say anything about our business development. I'm actually not allowed to say anything, but I can say something that is obvious. Of course, this data goes to big pharma, medium-sized pharma. They go especially to those where we had prior contact, have agreements with, and so on. But I cannot say anything more. That would not be correct. Next question, achieving stable disease already with the first patient is very promising, especially since it's known we need 2 responders for proof of concept. How confident are you that we can achieve proof of concept? First of all, it takes 16 weeks to get proof of concept. So we are halfway with the first patient. I feel pretty confident. This is my belief, and I'm also the founder and CEO of Scandion Oncology. So I feel very confident that we will achieve proof of concept in our phase 2 study. But we have to wait and see. And of course, why do I say this? Because I have seen, as you have now, the first data, and I think they point in the right direction. Next question. You once claimed that Scandion Oncology will be bought by big pharma as soon as SCO-101 achieves proof of concept. Sounds like that just became much more realistic with the latest results. Do you still stand behind that claim? I certainly do. And this is the agreement with several of the big pharma companies we have talked to. As soon as we have the first phase 2 data, we should share them with them, and we should take the next step to the discussions. So yes, I stand behind that claim, definitely. That was the last of these questions, and let me just go in here. I think that I have covered most of what I should do now. And again, please, if you have any questions, you can send it either now or later on. I try to answer as soon as possible, everybody. And I think it is very important at this stage that everybody understands what is in the press release. It's very, very important, because I don't want anybody to read the press release as they have shown toxicity, and now they have to take 3 more patients, and probably it's over with SCO-101. No, on the contrary. You should read it very positively, that we have the first potential signs of effects, the right effects of SCO-101 when it's combined with FOLFIRI. But at the same time, I need to be cautious here, because we have data on 1 patient. It looks good. We need more patients, and we need better understanding on this interaction. So we are on the right track, I'm totally sure, but we need more data before we get so excited. So we let the stock price increase further. I think it's really nice what we have here, but I'm cautious, but I'm also excited. So I think I will end up by saying thanks to all of you for joining, for spending Sunday evening together with me here. And again, write me if you have any questions, and I'll respond as well as I can. So I will close from here and say thanks again.